So The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, which actually comes out next week, although there have been screenings of it, which is, AKA the film that nearly killed Terry Gilliam. Adam Driver is the American ad director, Toby Grissoni, who is currently working on a project in Spain, which is a project involving Quixote and Sancho Panza, the figures of them. And while he's there, somebody gives him a DVD of a film that he made years ago, which is a student film, The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. And for that movie, he cast a local man as a cobbler named Javier, played by Jonathan Pryce, to play Don Quixote. And he realizes that he's not far from where that area was. And essentially, because he's artistically becalmed, he decides to go and find Javier and discovers him working as a kind of tourist attraction and still completely immersed in the role of Don Quixote. And the role has taken over his life to the point that he believes he is Don Quixote and that Adam Driver is Sancho Panza.
Look, do you remember years ago, about 10 years ago, I was making a film? You were just an old man I found.
I was lost. Forgotten.
Yeah, right, but then I found you, and I thought, this guy has an interesting face. It's the kind of face I'd use now to sell insurance.
I owe you a great debt, Sancho. You restored it to me.
You really don't remember? Don Quixote de la Mancha, the knight of the mournful countenance.
Come to restore the lost age of chivalry by a special will of heaven.
Yes! Well, I wrote that.
Okay?
I adapted it. The screenplay is a very different language to a novel, but it's...
Blasphemer! The hand of our God in heaven wrote me, not the filthy paw of some...
Okay, I apologize. I'm sorry.
You may beg forgiveness at the feet of my Lady Dulcinea.
Lady Dulcinea, right, of course. Okay.
I love that. The age of chivalry.
That's so Python-esque, though, isn't it?
It is, but in a wonderful way, because as we've always said, the thing about Holy Grail, the reason Holy Grail works isn't because it's got all the gags in it. It's because the setting is completely genuine. In fact, recently, in all the tributes that have been paid to Terry Jones, one of the things we've been talking about is you have to get the history right for the gags to work.
Yes.
So, anyway, for those who don't know, this film began life many decades ago. Back in the late 80s, it was a labour of love dream project for Gilliam, who's often been compared to Quixote, chasing windmills, chasing dreams, tilting at windmills. And there's a kind of the ghost of Orson Welles in the back of this because, of course, Orson Welles was famously had his uncompleted Quixote project, which actually then did subsequently get assembled after his death by Jess Franco. So, but the question of what the film would have looked like had Welles sort of properly done it is like one of the kind of the great movie mysteries. Anyway, it's a project which has defeated the greats in the past, and Gilliam started making the film around about the turn of the century with Johnny Depp, because he'd been in Fear and Loathing, and Jean Rochefort. And the production was beset by disaster. Rochefort was unwell, couldn't ride a horse. A typhoon knocked out the sets. Financing was pulled mid-shoot. The whole thing collapsed. There was a documentary called Lost in La Mancha, made by the same guys who made The Hamster Factor, which was about the making of 12 Monkeys. And Gilliam went on to do other projects. He did Brothers Grimm and Parnassus and Zero Theorem, but this was always his dream. And he finally got it back up and running again. I mean, everyone thought it was never going to happen, and then it did. And brilliantly, Adam Driver and Jonathan Pryce, Jonathan Pryce has joked that the reason Gilliam took so long making this film was he was waiting for Jonathan Pryce to be old enough to play the role. And Jonathan Pryce is perfectly suited to play the role. And there is also now this really weird coincidence that both Jonathan Pryce and Adam Driver are currently Oscar nominated at the point. So Gilliam's now, not only has he made the film, but he's made the film with 2 Oscar nominated.
Red hot properties.
Which is absolutely red hot. And I think they are perfect. I have to say that although we've only seen fragments of the version that Gilliam was working on before, it's hard to imagine that it would be better in terms of the casting than this. They are perfectly cast. The film itself is vintage Gilliam, and in as much as it's a kind of film it's the kind of film that Gilliam makes in all its unruly glory. Again, there's a carnivalesque quality to it. I said the Fellini reference because I had actually made a note of that when I was referring to the Gilliam. A sense of everything teetering on the brink of chaos. It feels deeply personal, and also it's less polished than the clips of the other version that we see, and I think better for it because it kind of has a scrappy indie feel, which I like. It's not for everyone, But then who wants a Terry Gilliam film that is? It's also worth saying that there is a documentary that'll come out here. It's played in New York, called He Dreams of Giants, made by the same people who made Hamster Factor and made Lost in La Mancha, which about the making, this time the making rather than the unmaking of the film. And I thought it was terrific. It's like a really honest and compassionate account of one man's struggle to will his dream into existence. And I think it gives a real insight into both the pain and the ecstasy of the creative process. And I think although the two things are separate, the feature film and the documentary, I think that it's really interesting to see somebody strive for that long, for that hard to get their vision onto the screen. Nobody could have made this film other than Terry Gilliam. And if you're not a Gilliam fan, it ain't going to work for you. It's not going to bring in new fans. But if you are a Gilliam fan, which I am, it is a very, very Terry film.